Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
You ready for the bonus episode?
Yeah.
So this is our bonus episode. We got a preview card for Throne of Eldraine from the nice people in Renton, Washington. And the name of our card is Rosethorn Halberd.
Yeah. It's equipment for G. And remember, Throne of Eldraine has artifacts that have colored mana associated with them. And it's an equipment that, like a bunch of the other equipment in the set, when you play it, it can attach to certain types of creatures automatically. So you get kind of like it's an aura up front. And then it has an equip cost so that even if the creature it was attached to dies, you can get a little bit extra value, get some extra options out of it, possibly some synergies. In this case, it's a green Unholy Strength. For green, you get a +2/+1 equipment that when it enters the battlefield attaches automatically to a non-human creature you control.
Yeah, so like the original Unholy Strength, Rosethorn Halberd gives that creature +2/+1. And I just want to clarify something. The creature doesn't have to die. You could just move the Rosethorn Halberd around if you're real rich.
Yeah, or if you just have something like a Pure Steel Paladin or some other card that lets you move it around for free.
Yeah, so this has just a regular equip cost of 5 in addition to that freebie coming down. Unholy Strength was a playable card in some formats. I remember playing that in Suicide Black decks back in, 1999 era.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is going to be a playable card. There's two different levels to look at this. The first is it's an Unholy Strength with upside, and there have been times it's not even unreasonable. In recent times, versions of Unholy Strength have been playable. It's not like it's a bad deal, because if you can get a good multiplier out of it, if you put this on something that has double strike, or if you care about the amount of damage dealt, I mean, even if you're just trying to do some bursty amount of damage, in some ways, this is a Goblin Guide, right? If everything's going well, it's a little bit of a Goblin Guide where you're getting 2 points of damage immediately. Admittedly, it's not a free roll that everything's just going to be working well.
I mean, you kind of had me at Goblin Guide.
The other thing is that it's got synergies, right? To begin with, it counts as an artifact. So if you've got cards take, for instance, All That Glitters. All That Glitters is 1 and a white enchant creature from Throne that has enchanted creature, gets +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment you control. And so All That Glitters wants you to be playing with lots of artifacts and enchantments. And so the fact that this one's giving you a bonus, every one of these artifacts, or every kind of artifact synergy you have, it all adds up. And even if the creature were to die and it were just sitting in play not equipped to anything, it still counts as an artifact that you have. And then there's lots of things in this set that take advantage of artifacts, being able to transform this into a 3/3 with Oko, Thief of Crowns.
Well, that's at least in colors, right? Because Oko is a green card and Rosethorn Halberd is a green card also.
Right. And there's some cards in this set, one of your favorites of the set, that dragon that needs four artifacts. Well, it's kind of nice if they're cheap, right?
Sure. So, I guess you could also that dragon itself is a non-human creature. You just drop this down there and give that dragon Unholy Strength, the Shimmer Dragon. So the Shimmer Dragon is a 4 UU for a 5/6 flying dragon. And it's fat Modi size to begin with, but as long as you control 4 or more artifacts, Shimmer Dragon has hexproof. I guess one of the things that I might want to do if I had a giant sized, I guess this would be a 7/7 Shimmer Dragon, is to give it hexproof. And it actually doesn't matter. The tappedness of the Halberd itself doesn't matter if you equip it to the dragon, right? So you could still have that as an untapped artifact for the dragon's secondary ability to tap 2 untapped artifacts you control to draw a card.
Mm-hmm.
I confess I had not thought about playing those 2 cards together.
Here's another one. If you're playing Animating Fairy is that Windrake, the Tuna Blue 2/2 flying fairy that has Bring to Life as a mode where you can go on an adventure, and for Tuna Blue, target non-creature artifact you control becomes a 0/0 artifact creature with 4+1/+1 counters on it. So here you can turn this in, like you can use it as part of your beatdown plan, and even if they kill whatever it is, you can transform this into a 4/4 that could attack immediately. Plus, you're going to be able to get a 2/2 flyer to follow it up. Plus, the 2/2 flyer is a non-human, so you could use it, and with evasion, you get a little bit of extra mileage out of the extra stats.
Yeah, so I guess like any cheap artifacts can potentially be synergistic with the animating fairy, and it's pretty cool. Like in the example that you cited, you could play the halberd first because it's cheap, and then you can bring it to life. Or if you got the fairy first, maybe you brought something to life earlier, you could just drop the halberd after on the animating fairy, and it's like a super cheap kind of unholy strength kind of goblin guide action. And then now you got a 4/3 flyer. That's a pretty quick clock actually.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, you could draw multiples of these. There's also various cards that call out equipment, such as Acclaimed Contender, one of the exciting new cards, 2 and a white, 3/3 human knight, so good types. Sadly, you can't equip this to it, but it does have the ability that when it enters the battlefield, if you control another knight, look at the top 5 cards of your library, you may reveal a knight or equipment or legendary artifact card from among them and put it in your hand and put the rest in the bottom of your library in random order. Now, obviously, if you're using a lot of human knights, you're not going to really get that much mileage out of this, but there are some other knights, zombie knights and such, that you could conceivably have enough of a non-human presence to be able to take advantage of this.
First of all, I don't think it's that bad. So the Acclaimed Contender is a 3/3 creature for 3 that, it's better than drawing a card, more or less, right? Because you can kind of get what you want, a knight, an aura, equipment, etc. This is an equipment, the halberd. Just because you can't equip it to the Acclaimed Contender doesn't necessarily mean that you can't equip it to something for free. And then the reality is, like in a long game, you could be equipping the halberd to an Acclaimed Contender. It just costs you 5. Right? I mean, that's obviously not plan A.
Maybe. I mean, it only costs you 2 if you're equipping it to Fervent Champion. That's even though he's a human, the 1/1 Human Knight World Champion card, replacing the previous Invitational card sort of schema. But it's Javier Dominguez is a 1/1 Human Knight with first strike and haste. When it attacks, another target attacking knight you control gets +1/+0 until on a turn. And equip abilities you activate, the target Fervent Champion costs 3 less to activate. So I mean, even if you were using it here, moving it for 2 mana is a lot more affordable than moving it for 5.
Yeah, that's really attractive, actually, because the Fervent Champion is just an R, right? So it's a 1/1 first strike haste. Yeah, it's pretty cheap to get on. Again, you're probably in a situation where this isn't necessarily plan A, because that is still not the best, right? But if you've got other stuff going on, other creatures that you might want to equip the halberd to, it's still part of the range, I think.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I mean, overall, just having access to a relatively efficient pump spell. I mean, there's some amount of similarities to Rancor, and that's an all-time banger. But instead of getting trample, you get +2/+1, which is at least like those are 2 different things. I mean, they're different, but they're like at least in the ballpark of each other, right?
Yeah. So it's funny that you talk about Rancor, because that obviously for me is also a card that kind of came to mind when I first saw the Rosethorn Champion. But like way back in the day, when Bone Splitter was the very first equipment, I think, that was ever spoiled, right? So there were obviously other equipment that were part of the set, but I had the preview for Bone Splitter back in the top decks column, or maybe it was Swimming with Sharks back then, and I compared Bone Splitter very closely to Rancor, kind of insofar that this was a pump spell that didn't have like the inherent disadvantages of a pump spell, because if the guy died, you could kind of get it back. And I felt like Bone Splitter had that in common with Rancor. And in a way, because of the green mana cost instead of a colorless mana cost, and the possibility of equipping it for free to non-human creatures, this feels very Rancorish to me. And I mean, that is... It's an outstanding card that has performed across many different formats, up even extended format, basically anytime it's ever been legal. So maybe Rosethorn Halberd's even better than I thought it was if you're putting it in the same breath as the Mighty Rancor.
Well, I mean, the biggest disadvantage, of course, compared to Rancor, you see, it's got a major pro and a major con. Major pro is that you can't fizzle it the way you can fizzle Rancor. Like, if your opponent killed the creature that was being targeted with Rancor in response, you get nothing.
Rancor goes to the graveyard and never has its Rancor kind of endurance ability.
Whereas with the Halberd, you actually get to keep it. Now, you'll have to pay to eventually put it on something else, but you don't just lose it. It's actually more reliable than Rancor in that way. The disadvantage, of course, is that Rancor only costs 1 to rebuy. This costs 5, which is an enormous opportunity cost.
Yeah. But I think, like, depending on the kind of decks that you play this in, either the 5 will be maybe not that meaningful in a long game. I mean, maybe you just end the game so fast because, I don't even have a strong conception of what Rosethorn Halberd decks are going to look like. But let's say you're playing it alongside, like, Lovestruck Beast, for sake of argument. So Lovestruck Beast is that really powerful new kind of adventuring Beast Noble. It makes a 5/5 Beast Noble for 3. Like, it's not going to take very long to go, like, Lovestruck Beast into Rosethorn Halberd. Like, that's 3 swings and you're dead. I think you just don't want to put the Rosethorn Halberd on the 1/1 white human creature token. There's a lot of problems with that. Number 1, you're not going to have a 1/1 to attack with Lovestruck Beast at some point. Number 2, it's awfully expensive because humans are not best buddies with Rosethorn Halberd. But if you're putting it on the beast itself, you're going to mess them up in 3 attacks. So maybe there's decks that are super fast. Or the other profile for green decks is just that they have a ton of mana in the long game, right? If you're playing Druids aplenty, maybe 5 is cheap to you.
Dude, you just put this on the goose and just start getting loose. Just get in there, 2 in the air, 2 in the air.
I mean, the goose looks better to me every time I look at it, right? Like, the first time I saw the goose, I was just like, I guess this is kind of a cute card. I read an even cooler combination with goose. So, Gilded Goose kind of made, like, peanut butter and chocolate for Oko Thief of Crowns. What do you think about just making a treasure with... a food with the goose every turn, and then just turning it into a 3/3, and you're still gaining loyalty with Oko? Like, that's kind of sick, right?
I mean, that's one way to do it.
I mean, you've got a factory.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you want to do there. I kind of just want to put this thing on a Barkhide Troll and get in there, Well, that's the way I'm imagining using this card. It's just for the pure beatdown.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's probably going to be some sweet beatdown decks with cheap drops that are going to be very, very happy to be wearing an Unholy Strength that's got some long game to it.
Yeah, and if you can just... I mean, like, some of the other cards really incent non-human play also, like Wildborn Preserver, which I think is just one of the most exciting cards in the set. 1 and a green, 2/2, flash reach. Whenever another non-human creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay X, and when you do, put X +1/+1 counters on Wildborn Preserver. So, like, there's some incentive to just, like, stay away from humans,
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, if you were just playing the Flash deck, right, I don't even think there's a single human in that deck, is there? Right? Like, it's all wolves and elf archers and...
fairies.
Maybe some merfolk in that deck.
Elves, yeah.
Yeah, so there might be a human, but I don't think off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think, though, just being able to play this with some sort of just pure aggressive green strategy, because... like, if your deck is full of elves and things like that, there's a lot of green creatures, whether they're elves or dinosaurs or questing beast, whatever. If you just want more pressure, the damage, the DPS from this particular equipment's pretty good. And then some of the most recent equipment synergies are rotating out with Dominaria, but the door is open for whenever there are more cards that call out equipment specifically. They're obviously going to work. They could potentially be, nice additions alongside this.
Just for what it's worth, you turned me around on Questing Beast. Questing Beast now gets my thumbs up. Putting a 2 additional power on Questing Beast, obviously, that's like putting 4 additional power on Questing Beast in a way, right?
It can be. I mean, that's like what he needs in order to finish off a lot of these planeswalkers that think they're going to live through whatever you're going to do.
Yeah.
I think that the tactical ability also, by the way, I think this is a very real thing. There's going to be spots where somebody drops a planeswalker and then ups their planeswalker in a way so that your creature on the table can't kill it. But if you could just add 2 extra points of damage to that creature and actually kill the planeswalker, that's a very high impact way to spend 1 mana while you're also buffing your creature and have the implied value of a piece of equipment later.
And you're just tapping mana, right? So kind of whoever taps the most mana is getting ahead as well, right?
You do say that.
I do.
Yeah.
Nobody ever won any games by not tapping mana.
Oh, Manaless Dredge?
Look, man, all I know is I was once playing against a Grand Prix champion, and I had a gigantic card drawing Sphinx in front of me, and you said you really just tap all the mana you can every turn, as he bounced it with and into the Royal, and then resolve chase the Mind Sculptor. I was like, yeah, I guess I do.
So what do you think, man? There's no way this gets played, by the way, in some sort of affinity deck or something in Modern, is there? Because that deck's just full of non-humans also.
Yeah. And
the ability to, for 1 mana, being able to like pump your Vault Scourge, it's kind of interesting, right?
I mean, you
need to have enough green mana.
Yeah, I think there are 2
But
problems.
The price is right?
I mean, G is a problem, right?
Well, is it? They're already wanting to play Hardened Scales.
That's a different deck. Those are 2 different decks. The Vault Scourge deck and the Hardened Scales deck, nary the 2 shall meet. I think that the Hardened Scales deck doesn't need... Like, this is so low power for the Hardened Scales deck. They're like +2/+1. We don't even have anything that small. Literally, the smallest buff in the Hardened Scales deck is +2/+2. That's literally the smallest one, right? Because it's +1/+1 and then another +1/+1. They just wouldn't want it.
Okay, what if you're playing some sort of a core duelist deck? Right? Where you have a 1/1 that has double strike while it's wielding an equipment, and it's a core, so it's not even a human. Like, you're probably playing core duelist because you want to go, equip your +10/+10 to it or whatever.
Hammer.
Yeah. But you can also, you're going to want to have other pieces of equipment, potentially. And having the plan of being, like, this is a pretty efficient way to buff a guy if you're trying to do some bursty infect deck with an equipment base instead of a pump spell base.
Actually, if you're going to talk to me about equipment, I don't hate this in equipment. I'm sorry, in infect, sorry.
Yeah, you put this on a Glistener Elf or whatever.
This is all right on a Glistener Elf. There's
that's a pretty good amount of stat there, right? Well, and if you value it being an artifact,
what if you value it giving a toughness, right? So a lot of the guys in the infect deck have only a single toughness. So obviously there's a wide variety of removal that you can use to come after the odd Glistener Elf, but some of that removal is like stuff along the lines of a gut shot. Or they get brick walled by like Lingering Souls tokens a lot. That's like a thing that people try to do to stop them. And just giving them a second toughness opens up a lot of window that they might not otherwise have. That I think is that's a different thing entirely.
Okay, yeah.
And at the end of the day, it just could be spell skite in. You might just swinging with the spell skite. Here he comes. I only have the stats of a wall.
Well, what's interesting, though, in all seriousness, you know how like Spellskite is usually just the bee's knees versus the pump spells of an infect deck?
Like if you've got a Spellskite, yeah, you turn off the entire deck.
Except if some of their pump spells are the halberds, you can't Spellskite that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
against like in the mirror match.
Yeah.
Will staying power. Oh, I don't hate that at all. Yeah, this is pretty cool. You know, here's another thing that's like a small synergy, but actually makes a lot of sense. A lot of those infect decks in Modern now are playing with Teferi Time Reveler, you know, because it gives them kind of the insta-kill combo because you can't interact with them if you've got Teferi online. You could just bounce the Rosethorn Halberd and then replay it, which just saves you 5 mana. Right? Like, I know that's like an odd way to do it, but like...
Yes, it is. It definitely is an odd way to do it.
And yet, that will be the right... I predict that will be the right play at some point for some player. At some time.
You and me both, man. You and me both. I'm with you. Well, awesome, dude. Excited just to see what all different versions of these they make. You know, there's a variety of these, further exploring the space of what's aura, what's equipment, and I like the whole. It gives you a lot of the card is up front, but then it gives you ways to spend your mana later.
Yeah,
and then there's some synergy possibilities. Just a cool design.
I like this card a lot. I really came around on it, I should say. Like I thought it was like kind of medium, but it's exciting. It's a little bit of Unholy Strength, a little bit of Rancor, and I think that bouncing it with Teferi Time Reveler is what I'm going to try to do in all formats moving forward.
You got to be careful though. If somebody bounces your creature wielding it, you're going to be a sad person.
Oh well, I'll just have to bounce back. Speaking of bouncing back. Our regularly scheduled episode coming up tomorrow.
Yep. So check us out then as we figure out how to put the halberd on Rankle Master of Pranks, how to put it on Murderous Rider, how to put it on all sorts of non-human creatures, plus occasionally talking about some of the other cards in Throne of Eldraine.
All right. See you tomorrow, Patrick.
See you then.
In life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge, so jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state.